What I want to talk a little bit about today is another journey, right? Because we all work in very complicated organizations, and if you actually listen to the subtext of what the panelists were talking about, so much of the way we intervene in actually getting those results is it's all about the culture of the organization. So just very quickly, I'm from Southern California. Kaiser is the oldest group model HMO in the country. We've been in business for about 60 years, and we serve 7 regions at this point in time. And just like everyone else, we have a mission statement that we've developed and has been operating for quite some time. In Southern California, I operate 14 hospitals, and we serve 3.65 million members with a little under 6,000 doctors and 60,000 employees. And we go from Bakersfield down to San Diego, from West Ventura all the way out to Palm Springs. So it's a huge geographical spread, and with a lot of employees, the whole question of how do you actually make an impact on that culture becomes pretty compelling. Like everyone, we have a lot of consultants and everyone else that can help us craft beautiful, beautiful strategic plans. But you know what? A very wise mentor once told me, don't believe in your own headlines. Actually, he said it a different way, don't believe your own BS, right? And I think that's actually true, because the key is you can have the most beautiful strategic plan about serving the community, total health, whatever, all of the things that we all aspire to do, but it's about the boots on the ground and how do you actually get into the hearts and minds of the people that have to deliver the care. And that's where I think the National Center is talking, why this agenda is so important. How do we actually mobilize the leadership to actually get there, right? When we started this journey, we came across this book by David Logan from the USC Marshall School. And basically it boils down to a very simple concept that if you look at even the most complicated organisms, you really think, you have to think about them as smaller units, smaller, what he calls tribes or tribal units. And they're between 20 and 150 people that you work with on an ongoing basis. And of course, it's never perfect because these tribes overlap in complex organizations, right? But if you really think about it, even the most complicated organizations, they're tribe of tribes, right? And where we have to influence the tribes and mobilize and try to develop a much more comprehensive culture for performance and improvement is in trying to make sure that the leadership of those tribes actually are aligned in some way. And what I love about this whole analysis is that he actually gives us a topology of tribes, tribal culture, and tribal leadership. And I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about it, but you can see the behaviors and the language. He breaks it down into 5 stages. And it's basically, if you look at most organizations, it is a bell-shaped curve, right? And obviously, you don't want to be in stage 1, which are basically what typifies stage 1 are tribes that are gangs, right? Where people think that their the members' basic view is that life stinks, and they're together to sort of fight against the world and to try to make their way overall. And their behavior is despairing hostility. Now, what I think is more important is that most organizations are at stage 2, 3, and possibly 4. And 2, really you can sort of see it in organizations where members of the tribe or members of the department or members of the organization might feel that their life stinks, right? My life stinks, and the behavior is really trying to be, just do the minimal possible. You're a victim. You're not really part of the whole thing. It's just a job, right? So many people, you may be able to relate to that. Where I think most of us in healthcare are the stage 3, where, and I think the speakers today talked a little bit about the culture of medicine, culture of surgery. It's very, very much the professional model, right? The lone warrior. You're trained to know what to do. You're trained to trust only yourself. And the language and the underlying sentiment is, I'm great. And what the implication, of course, is, I'm great, you're not, right? I don't want to cast aspersions on any professional groups, but you might imagine in your professional setting having seen that kind of behavior where people feel as if they're the professional, they know what's going on, and they're going to take it forward. And the leadership style follows from that, very hierarchical, et cetera, right? And the fourth and fifth is really what I wanted to talk a little bit more about, and that is where the tribes and the tribal groups come together, and they're beginning to think that there's something bigger that they're doing that's more important, where you think most of healthcare should be going, right? Because all of us went into healthcare to make a difference in communities and in patients' lives, and so you would think that we should be naturally aligned there, but if you actually look at most of our organizations, we're not always there. And where the language and behavior is probably captured by the language, we're great. The aspiration to do the best job you can for the community. But unfortunately, what a lot of our organizations do use is the counterpoint, which is we strive to be great in a competitive market at the expense of our competitors. So it's we're great, they're not, is the implication. And finally, the fifth stage, and where I think captivated our leadership, is trying to get to this other place where there's really a noble cause that we can buy into. And it's sort of this whole idea of innocent wonderment, and where the key language is life is great. Aren't we doing a wonderful job? We're going to get better because we have a noble mission. And that is what you want our organizations to drive towards. Now, no organization is perfect. You know, within complex organizations, you're going to have subunits at varying stages. But the whole point is, how do we get our leadership and all of these subgroups that are very, very, very active and are key to our ability to deliver on performance, how do we get them to move up the stage ladder and get to the stages 4 and 5? Okay, so when I first I've been at Kaiser only 8.5 years, which sounds like a long time, but in Kaiser years, it's really short. It's like a nanosecond if you think about it. But when I got there, and I got there for a variety of reasons, because of some issues around some leadership that we needed to deal with. But what I found was, and I don't know how typical your C-suites are, but we had great people. We had wonderful people who were very smart and very committed, but they didn't work together, right? And I tell this story a lot. We did a lot of work around, has anybody ever done a fishbowl exercise where you get people in the middle and it's really an open discussion? Well, I love the fishbowl, but I hated what happened when I sat in the fishbowl and everybody, all they wanted to know was, what's your strategy? How are you going to do it? Where are we going? You know, and when you really think about that, that's not about team. That's really a dependent culture. People wanting to know what you think we should be going, and let's follow you, right? And that's not really where we need to be in terms of leadership. You can have the most enlightened leader in the world, but no organization can depend on one leader. And I think that's one of the key things that had to happen. So I took our functional leads, our senior vice presidents, and the 14 executive directors of our hospitals, and we started this leadership journey. We did all of the stuff that you would like to do. We did a lot of team building exercises, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the other structures that we put in. A lot of this, by the way, was trying to figure out how do we develop trust with one another, but also how we develop a common language, right? Because in a lot of ways, when you actually talk about leadership, everybody talks about it in a different light. And in some ways, it's really important to actually get a common vocabulary so we know exactly what's going on. And then, after we did the first layer of about 20 leaders, we went down to the chief operating officer level and the chief nursing officers, really the key people in any hospital setting that has to actually move forward. So once we did that, and that took about a 2-year period because there was a lot of learning that we had to do, and Vicki and Enriquez was introduced to you, but we had a group of, and she's the managing director of our organizational effectiveness unit, They did an incredible job helping us shape this whole effort. We decided that after we did this, that we were going to take it to another level, right? And we went big, right? Because, you know, when you think about it, we're all getting old. At least that's how I feel. I'm getting old. If I had to do this 20 people at a time, it would be like 2050 before I'm finished, right? And by that time, this whole generations would have to come. So what we decided to do, we were going to go to the next 300. Actually, we started out the next 300 level down, and it turned out that there was such interest that we ended up with about 380 leaders down the road. And the point was that if you had, you know, I had my senior leaders, we were all talking about the same thing, but I didn't really feel confident that we were going to be able to cascade it down to the organization. And the only way you can be sure is if the leadership that you think are thinking like you and acting like you can actually bring other people on board. So what we did was we took these 380 people, we set up groups with 20 groups. Every single senior leader was in charge of running a group over a 1.5-year period, and every single member of their group was a different part of the organization, right? So we didn't do it by silos, we didn't do it by medical centers, the finance people didn't do it all together, because what that would have been reinforced was the siloed way that we worked. So we maximally mixed everyone. So a finance officer from San Diego might have a chief clinician from Bakersfield, right? So you get the point. And then we supported them with organizational effectiveness consultants, and this happened over a 18-month period. And we, you know, what we did was we built time for people to come together to begin to understand what the program was and what the vocabulary was, and practice, really just practice how we were going to engage with each other differently. And the journey looked like, you know, this is actually a beautiful, I think there's a better picture down the road. We did a lot of experiential work. We went out to beautiful settings in nature, and we worked with, I'll go back, and we worked with lots of different tools. We did low V's, but I'll talk a little bit about the special work we did with horses, if you, in a moment. We use lots of different models, and I don't really want to spend a lot of time on models. This is a Stacy diagram that talks a little bit about, you know, the environment that we're in, and how difficult it is when there's less certainty and low agreement. You really run into a chaotic model. We use these as sort of core structural components to get people thinking about the work of leadership in a different way. I would just want to spend a few minutes here, and one of the things that we realize is that, and if you can actually track this model to the Logan model on tribal culture. You know, in many organizations, and this, by the way, it's the same thing. Within your organization, you'll have different aspects, right? You have either a dependent culture, independent culture, or interdependent culture. They're not fine lines, they cross, so I don't want to get hard and fast about it. But if you actually look at the topology here, you can see that, you know, dependent cultures are very hierarchical, authority-oriented, and where people are just waiting around to be told what to do, right? And not necessarily the leadership that you want in a very, very complex, ambiguous environment. Where we are now today, I think, in medicine is largely in an independent state where people are professional, they really want to do the right thing, but they're really dependent on themselves or their own small group to actually get things done. And there are calculated risks. People withhold information sometimes because, remember, the dominant behavior is I'm great, and by implication, you're not, and you may not get the full benefit. And so what we wanted to do was move towards a state of interdependence where, you know, you can talk about it in very different ways, teamwork, all of that stuff, but basically where you know, there is a realization that we're going to accomplish a lot more working collectively, and really freeing ourselves up from the games that you play when you're in a dependent or interdependent culture, to free people up, free their energy, free their thinking about the possibilities, to try to hopefully get to a much nobler cause, right? So that was the general thrust of where we wanted to go. And that's why we talk about this as a pathway towards an interdependent culture. And then we use things like the results model. And the reason I say that is that if you actually say, this is my map in Southern California, everybody knows what you're talking about. And basically, this results model is just sort of a way for you to stop, challenge, and choose when you're confronted with a situation. To ask you to examine what are your underlying assumptions about what just happened, what's the actual endpoint that you want, and then to try to circle your behaviors to try to fit that a little bit more. And people actually talk about that now. Everyone says, well, this is my map. I think the doctors are crazy here, you know, and all that stuff. We'll actually say it because, you know, the results model says that it's okay to put it out there. I mean, to check to see if it's real or not, right? To see whether there's some factual basis to the things that you're thinking. It's much worse to keep it inside and then act as if that's a reality and then get the reactions. And it's a lot, as believe it or not, it's a real waste of time when you do that. So we concentrated on these kinds of things within the core curriculum. And then, you know, this is just another piece of what we did. You know, if you think about stage 0, 1, and maybe even 2, or dependent or dependent and independent cultures, so much of it is really fear-driven, right? People play not to lose. They play avoidance games. There's varying degrees of trust. And what we wanted to do was move the culture to be the leadership culture to be vision-directed, play to win, try to be open, creative, engaged, committed, trust each other, and hopefully grow with each other. And here's the grand kickoff, Dodger Stadium. We actually kicked it off in Dodger Stadium, if you can believe it. And this is a lifelong Yankee fan who had to do this. That's me in my Yankee hat, by the way. These were all the leaders from all over Southern California. One of our executive directors, a real ham. All right, well, let's move on. You get the idea, right? You have to do it. We did it in a big way. We tried to make it fun. And we did use experiential learning. So I don't know if anyone has done the low V, ever done that. It's actually a pretty scary thing and you really need to trust each other to be able to do that. We created a lot of unique opportunities for learning, right? And you know, I don't know how many people have been around horses. I'm from New York City, so the only horses I've been around were the ones that walked around Central Park. And believe me, it's a totally different experience when you get up close with wild herds of horses, as well as horses that have been trained to work with people. Horses are herd animals, right? And in a lot of ways, they will follow leaders if you're clear, if they trust you, if you show them that you're directed, and then you can muster the energy to get them moving. And we actually had horses do obstacle courses with us. And of course, the first groups, you know, was really funny. We had this tiny little horse. I was part of a group, and we had this tiny little horse, and you figure, oh, come on, we'll take this little horse on a walk, just like you walk a dog. And believe it or not, if the horse doesn't trust you, they're going to go off and get water while you're trying to, you can't pull them. I mean, they're just but the incredible thing is, once the leadership group is aligned, and they're focused, and they have the same energy. All of the things that we were talking about in some of our leadership models, it's amazing visually what would happen. And actually, to tell you the truth, when you have 40 people watching a group struggling in the beginning and then really figure out how to get it together and figure out how to trust each other and be aligned, and then to see this, you know, 1.5-ton horse or whatever it is, you know, wandering an obstacle course, it is a very, very compelling example of how you actually can apply this to your own setting. And then we had people do really funny things like artwork. What does this mean for you? These are actually groups that did a group art. I mean, you know, I don't want to dwell on the messages, but every single one put something that was meaningful to them over that 18-month period. And then where have we gone since we did this? By the way, this was just the health plan hospital side. So, and remember, we're a complex organization. We have labor unions, we have the medical group. Well, what happened was, you know, all of a sudden we had 400 leaders on our side, the health plan hospital side, speaking this language, engaging each other. All of a sudden the doctor said, oh my God, this is really kind of great. Some people took it back to their medical centers and began to integrate it with their doctors. And then our executive medical director of our Permanente medical group in Southern California decided that he would do it with his team. So they've spent a year doing it with their senior leadership team, and now we've actually done some work with our two teams coming together with the idea that we're actually going to cascade it even further down. And in fact, we've just recently had some conversations with our labor union leaders who actually have been hearing about all this work, and they want to get involved as well. So it'll get a little more complicated, obviously, but the whole point is we have a common vocabulary. We actually are trying to build open conversations in everything we do. We model it, and by the way, the goal, the charge to the 400 people that we actually finished with about 1.5 years ago was to take it forward, take it down, and our organizational effectiveness group would help them move it down there and cascade it down through, into the organization. So that's where we've gone with this journey. Modeling from the top, leaders willing to make themselves vulnerable, right? Commitment from all levels of leadership, time and organizational resources. And it wasn't that expensive for our, you know, next year our Southern California budget is approaching $20 billion. I think we spent $250,000 or something like that on this effort. And sustainability over time, which means that you have to embed all of this work into the culture. It did create a culture of shared leadership and interdependence, which has been leading us to really greater innovation, a larger ability to begin to solve some of the complex problems that we're having. A lot of it, performance improvement, I think, are attributable in part to what we've done with leadership development and sort of recognition of our achievements. And I told you, don't believe your own BS. Now I'm going to give you our BS. You see where we are, that we've actually just sort of elevated to the top of the charts in a lot of some of these measures of quality and performance. Whether you believe the methodology or not, we're still there. And that's it. With 58 seconds to spare, a couple of questions, and Vicki's here to help me answer. Yes, Jeff.
Ben, did you have any moments of truth where you were challenged and you had to deal with those challenges, or was it just kind of a smooth sail all the way?
Well, that's a great question, you know, and if you've ever been in a fishbowl, you know where the challenges are. People are coming at you with all these questions and wondering, why are we spending our time? Why are we wasting our resources doing this stuff? But it actually worked out fine. Because, you know, one of the things that we talked a little bit about, leaders needing to show vulnerability, right? Because if you're modeling, you know, a dependent or an independent organization, or stage 2 or stage 3, by saying, I'm the boss, I'm going to tell you what to do, and that's it, then you're not going to get the results. So you have to be able to say, I don't know what our strategy is. What do you think our strategy is, right? I refuse to answer that question, what's our strategy? Because it was really just reinforcing a dependent culture, and I didn't want to do that, right? Yes?
Ben indicated that the docs got into this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Kaiser Permanente.
Yes. Yep. They had their medical group administrators as well. And now the next step for them is to take the big step. They're going to probably do 400 of their top departmental chiefs and all the way down. And I think that once they do that, we'll actually bring much more together. Our work, I think, was going to be more with the labor unions, which, you know, if you know anything about Kaiser, we're really heavily unionized. And to get the kind of flexibility in terms of being able to move forward, we need them on board in a way. Okay, well, thank you very much.